Okay. I think we are ready to go. Let's see. Got it. Right. Hopefully somebody will join us today. I'm still in New Orleans, and we just had some nice Prabhupada festival today. Very nice Prabhupada festival. And we're going to continue with our Krishna book reading. And just want to show you, we have nice festival. Something like that. And everybody got this nice memento from the Prabhupada Festival. ISKCON New Orleans. And Prabhupada in the back. Nice medallion. So this is a very nice festival, remembrances of Prabhupada, and many devotees came to this festival. And it was wonderful. Honor, I guess, of Prabhupada's appearance. Something 125th or something like that. Okay. Let me just check to make sure we are online and streaming. We are. So it's good to see everybody. And I guess I'll chant. And after I'll chant, we're going to continue with our Krishna book reading. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Jana Balapa Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balapa Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhova Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhova Kunya Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. So, Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paravatakacharya, Ostentata, Satashi, Shimad, His Divine Grace Savaya, Chaitanya, Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananda Koti, Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shitweda Gadadha, Shri Vasadi Gaur, Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna, Gopi Gopinath, Sai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri, Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturanam Ki Jai, Jagadava Sami Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Srimad Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Go Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, Hari 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 Bol. Nama Om Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutlale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharani, Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschacha Teja Tarani. So, okay. So we're going to continue with our reading of Krishna book today. Hold on a second. All right. So, we are quickly coming to the end of Krishna book, and the chapter today we're going to read about is basically chapter 86. There's only 90 chapters in the Krishna book. And as I mentioned before, right now I am in New Orleans Temple, which is called New Sankirtanpura. Here's the deities. Whoops. Hopefully, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if you can see. It's all blurry. Anyway, whatever. So we're leaving tomorrow back for North Carolina, and we'll resume our normal schedule hopefully tomorrow. So let's go on to the Krishna book. Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Jakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shikara Maha. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So today we have a very interesting chapter, which is called the kidnapping of Subhadra. Oh, guess who kidnapped her? That, of course, was Arjuna. And Lord Krishna is visiting Shrutadev and Bahulashva. So, let's go. After hearing of the incidents described, let me make sure the volume is high enough here. Okay, give me a second. Yeah, it needs to be higher. Okay, that's better. After hearing of the incidents described in the last chapter, King Parikshit became more inquisitive to hear about Krishna and his pastimes, and thus he inquired from Shukadev Goswami how his grandmother Subhadra was kidnapped by his grandfather Arjuna at the instigation of Lord Krishna. King Parikshit was very eager to hear how his grandfather kidnapped and married his grandmother. Thus Shukadev Goswami began to narrate the story as follows. Once upon a time, King Parikshit's grandfather Arjuna, the great hero, was visiting several holy places of pilgrimage, and while traveling all over, he happened to come to Pravasa Kshetra. So we have to understand that Arjuna was visiting all the holy places of pilgrimage because he had taken a vow to leave his brothers because he had intruded on Draupadi and Yudhisthira when they were together because he had to get the weapons because there were some people stealing cows. And that was the agreement that he had to go into exile for a certain period of time. So he went into exile, went in pilgrimage. Of course, he married a whole bunch of girls while he was in pilgrimage. And finally, now he's in Pravasa Kshetra. In Pravasa Kshetra, he heard the news that Lord Balaram was negotiating the marriage of Subhadra, the daughter of Arjuna's maternal uncle, Vasudeva. Although her father Vasudeva and her brother Krishna were not in agreement with him, Balaram was in favor of marrying Subhadra to Duryodhana. Arjuna, however, desired to gain Subhadra's hand himself. As he thought of Subhadra and her beauty, Arjuna became more and more captivated with the idea of marrying her, and with a plan in mind, he dressed himself like a Vaishnava sannyasi, carrying a tridanda in his hand. The Mayavadi sannyasis take one dand or one rod, whereas the Vaishnava sannyasis take three dandas or three rods. The three rods or tridanda indicate that a Vaishnava sannyasi vows to render service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead with his body, mind, and words. The system of Tridanda Sannyas has been in existence for a long time, and the Vaishnava sannyasis are called Tridandis, or sometimes Tridandi Swamis, or Tridandi Goswamis. Sannyasis are generally meant to travel all over the country for preaching work, but during the 4 months of the rainy season, from July through October, actually sometimes through November, they do not travel but take shelter in one place and remain there without moving. This non-movement of the sannyasi is called Chaturmasha Vrata. Vrata means a vow. When a sannyasi stays in one place for these 4 months, the local inhabitants of that place take advantage of his presence to become spiritually advanced. Arjuna, in the dress of a Tridandi sannyasi, remained in the city of Dwarka for the 4 months of the rainy season, devising a plan whereby he could get Subhadra as his wife. None of the inhabitants of Dwarka, including Lord Balaram, could recognize the sannyasi to be Arjuna. Therefore, all of them offered their respects and obeisances to the sannyasi without knowing the actual situation. One day, Lord Balaram invited this particular sannyasi to lunch at his home. Balaramaji would very respectfully offer him all kinds of palatable dishes, and the so-called sannyasi was eating sumptuously. That's how you know he wasn't a sannyasi. While eating at the home of Balaramaji, Arjuna was simply looking at beautiful Subhadra, who was very enchanting to great heroes and kings. Out of love for her, Arjuna's eyes brightened and he looked at her with glittering eyes. Arjuna decided that somehow or other he would achieve Subhadra as his wife, and his mind became agitated on account of this strong desire. Arjuna, the grandfather of Maharaj Parikshit, was himself extraordinarily beautiful, and his bodily structure was very attractive to Subhadra, who decided within her mind that she would accept only Arjuna as her husband. As a simple girl, she was smiling with great looking at Arjuna, in other words, looking at a sannyasi. Thus, Arjuna also became more and more attracted by her. In this way, Subhadra dedicated herself to Arjuna, and he resolved to marry her by any means. He then became absorbed 24 hours a day and thought of how he could get Subhadra as his wife. He was afflicted with the thought of getting Subhadra and had not a moment's peace. Actually, the reason that Duryodhana wanted to marry Subhadra is that he wanted to establish a relationship with the Yadus so that later on, when Arjuna and the Pandavas wanted to fight with the Yadus, not fight with the Yadus, but fight with the Kurus, the Yadus would take the Kurus' side. So this was a political strategy. Many times in those days, marriages were arranged for political reasons, and that was Duryodhana's idea. And because of that, he actually made friends with Balaram and even became a disciple of Balaram. He was learning how to fight with a club from Balaram. And Balaram is sometimes called Duryodhana Guru, which means he's the guru of Duryodhana. So that's a name that Prabhupada actually gave some of his disciples, Duryodhana Guru. Of course, the other devotees, when they talked to this particular devotee whose name was Duryodhana Guru, generally didn't use the second part of the name and would call him Duryodhana. So that was not very much appreciated. Once upon a time, Subhadra, seated on a chariot, came out of the palace fort to see the gods in the temple. Arjuna took this opportunity, and with the permission of Vasudeva and Devaki, he kidnapped her. After getting on Subhadra's chariot, he prepared himself for a fight. Taking up his bow and holding off with his arrows, the soldiers ordered to check him. Arjuna took Subhadra away. While Subhadra was thus being kidnapped by Arjuna, her relatives and family members began to cry. But still, he took her just like a lion takes his prey and departs. When it was disclosed to Lord Balaram that the so-called sannyasi was Arjuna, who had planned such a device simply to take away Subhadra, and that he had actually taken her, he became very angry. Just as the waves of the ocean become agitated on the full moon day, Lord Balaram became greatly disturbed. Lord Krishna was in favor of Arjuna, therefore, along with the other members of the family, he tried to pacify Balaram by falling at his feet and begging him to pardon Arjuna. Krishna convinced Lord Balaram that Subhadra was attached to Arjuna, and thus Balaram became pleased to know that she wanted Arjuna as her husband. The matter was settled, and to please the newly married couple, Lord Balaram arranged to send a dowry consisting of an abundance of riches, including elephants, chariots, horses, men servants, and maid servants. So we should also understand that Balaram was convinced because the driver of the chariot was Subhadra. Come in. Come in. No one's at the door. They're just knocking on the floor, I guess. Maharaj Parikshit was very eager to hear more about Krishna. And so after finishing the narration of Arjuna's kidnapping Subhadra, Shukadeva Goswami began to narrate another story as follows. There was a household Brahmin in the city of Mithila, the capital of the city of Videha. This Brahmana, whose name was Shrudadev, was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Because he was fully Krishna conscious and always engaged in the service of the Lord, he was completely peaceful in mind, detached from all material attraction. He was very learned and had no desire other than to be fully situated in Krishna consciousness. Although in the order of household life, he never took great pains to earn anything for his livelihood. He was satisfied with whatever he could achieve without much endeavor, and somehow or other he lived in that way. Every day he would get the necessities of life in just the quantity required, and not more. That was his destiny. The Brahmana had no desire to get more from what he needed. Thus, he was peacefully executing the regulative principles of a Brahmana's life as enjoined in the revealed scriptures. Fortunately, the king of Mithila was as good a devotee as the Brahmana. The name of this famous king was Bahulashva. He was very well established in his reputation as a good king, and he was not at all ambitious to extend his kingdom for the sake of sense gratification. As such, both the Brahmana and King Bahulashva remained pure devotees of Lord Krishna in Mithila. Since Lord Krishna was very merciful toward these two devotees, King Bahulashva and the Brahmana Shutadev, he one day asked his driver Ituruka to take his chariot into the capital city of Mithila. Lord Krishna was accompanied by great sages Narada, Vamadev, Atri, Vyasadev, Parashuram, Asita, Daruna, Shukadev, Brahaspati, Kanva, Maitreya, Jaivana, and others. Lord Krishna and the sages passed through many villages and towns, and everywhere the citizens would receive them with great respect and offer them articles and worship. To the citizens who came to see the Lord and all the assembled sages, it seemed as though the sun were present, along with his various satellite planets. In that journey, Lord Krishna and the sages passed through the kingdoms of Anartha, Dhanva, Kurjangala, Konka, Matsya, Panchala, Kunti, Maru, Kekaya, Koshala, and Arana. And thus all the citizens of these places, both men and women, could see Lord Krishna face to face. In this way, they enjoyed celestial happiness with open hearts full of love and affection for the Lord. And when they saw the face of the Lord, it seemed to them that they were drinking nectar through their eyes. When they saw Krishna, all the ignorant misconceptions of their lives dissipated. When the Lord passed through the various countries and the people came to visit him, simply by glancing over them, the Lord would bestow all good fortune upon them and liberate them from all kinds of ignorance. In some places, the demigods would join with the human beings, and their glorification of the Lord would cleanse all directions of all inauspicious things. In this way, Lord Krishna gradually reached the kingdom of Videha. When the citizens received the news of the Lord's arrival, they all felt unlimited happiness and came to welcome him, taking gifts in their hands to offer. As soon as they saw Lord Krishna, their hearts immediately bloomed in transcendental bliss, just like lotus flowers upon the rising of the sun. Previously, they had simply heard the names of the great sages, but had never seen them. Now, by the mercy of Lord Krishna, they had the opportunity of seeing both the great sages and the Lord himself. King Bahulashva and the Brahmin Shrutadeva, knowing well that the Lord had come there just to grace them with favor, immediately fell at the Lord's lotus feet and offered their respects. With folded hands, the king and the Brahmana each simultaneously invited Lord Krishna and all the sages to his home. In order to please both of them, Lord Krishna expanded himself into two and went to the houses of each one of them, yet neither the king nor the Brahmana could understand that the Lord had gone to the house of the other. Both thought that the Lord had gone only to his own house. That he and his companions were present in both houses, although both the Brahmin and the king thought he was present in one house only, is another opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This opulence is described in the revealed scriptures as Vaibhava Prakasha. When Lord Krishna married 16,000 wives, he expanded himself into 16,000 forms, each one of them as powerful as he himself. Similarly, in Vrindavan, when Brahma stole Krishna's calves and cowherd boys, Krishna expanded himself into many new calves and boys. Bahulashva, the king of Videha, was very intelligent and was a perfect gentleman. He was astonished that so many great sages, along with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were personally present in his home. He knew perfectly well that conditioned souls engaged in worldly affairs cannot be 100% pure, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotees are always transcendental to worldly contamination. Therefore, when he found that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and all the great sages were at his home, he was astonished and and began to thank Lord Krishna for his causeless mercy. Feeling very much obliged and wanting to receive his guest to the best of his ability, he called for nice chairs and cushions, and Lord Krishna, with all the sages, sat down very comfortably. At that time, King Balashva's mind was very restless, not because of any problems, but because of great ecstasy of love and devotion. His heart was filled with love and affection for the Lord and his associates, and his eyes were filled with tears of ecstasy. He washed the feet of his divine guests, and afterwards he and his family members sprinkled the water on their own heads. After this, he offered the guests nice flower garlands, sandalwood pulp, incense, new garments, ornaments, lamps, cows, and bulls. In a manner just befitting his royal position, he worshipped each one of them in this way. When all had been fed sumptuously and were sitting very comfortably, Balashva came before Lord Krishna and caught his lotus feet. He placed them on his lap, and while massaging the feet with his hands, began to speak in a sweet voice. Speak about the glories of the Lord in a sweet voice. My dear Lord, you are the super soul of all living entities, and as the witness within the heart, you are cognizant of everyone's activities. Thus, we are duty-bound to always think of your lotus feet so that we can remain in a secure position and not deviate from your eternal service. As a result of our continuous remembrance of your lotus feet, you have kindly visited my place personally to favor me with your causeless mercy. We have heard, my dear Lord, that by your various statements you confirm your pure devotees to be more dear to you than Lord Balaram, or your constant servitor, the goddess of fortune. Your devotees are dearer to you than your first son, Lord Brahma, and I am sure that you have so kindly visited my place in order to prove your divine statement. I cannot imagine how people can be godless and demoniac even after knowing of your causeless mercy and affection for your devotees who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness. How can people who know of these things forget your lotus feet? My dear Lord, it is known to us that you are so kind and liberal that when a person leaves everything just to engage in Krishna consciousness, you sometimes give yourself in exchange for that unalloyed service. You have appeared in the Yadu dynasty to fulfill your mission of reclaiming all conditioned souls rotting in the sinful activities of material existence. And this appearance is already famous all over the world. My dear Lord, you're the ocean of unlimited mercy, love, and affection. Your transcendental form is full of bliss, knowledge, and eternity. You can attract everyone's heart by your beautiful form as Shamachandra Krishna. Your knowledge is unlimited, and to teach all people how to execute devotional service, you have sent your incarnation, Narayana, who was engaged in severe austerities and penances at Badri Narayana. Kindly, therefore, accept my humble obeisance at your lotus feet. My dear Lord, I beg you to request you and your companions, the great sages and Brahmanas, to remain at my place for at least a few days, so this family of the famous King Nimi may be sanctified by the dust of your lotus feet. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of his devotee, and thus he remained there for a few days with all the sages to sanctify the city of Mithila and all its citizens. Meanwhile, the Brahmana Shrutadeva, simultaneously receiving Krishna's associates at his home, was transcendently overwhelmed with joy. After offering his guests nice sitting places, the Brahmana began to dance, waving about his wrap. That means his chadar. Shrutadeva, being not at all rich, offered only mattresses, wooden planks, straw carpets, and so on to his distinguished guests, Lord Krishna and the sages, but he welcomed them to the best of his ability. He spoke very highly of the Lord and the sages, and he and his wife washed the feet of each one of them. After this, he took the water and sprinkled it over all the members of his family, and although the Brahmana appeared very poor, he was at that time most fortunate. While Shrutadeva was welcoming Lord Krishna and his associates, he simply forgot himself in transcendental joy. After welcoming the Lord and his companions according to his ability, he brought fruits, incense, scented water, scented clay, tulasi leaves, cushion straw, and lotus flowers. They were not costly items and could be secured very easily, but because they were offered with devotional love, Lord Krishna and his associates accepted them very gladly. The Brahmana's wife cooked simple foods like rice and dal, and Lord Krishna and his followers were very much pleased to accept them, because they were offered in devotional love. When Lord Krishna and his associates were fed in this way, the Brahmana Shrutadeva was thinking thus: I have fallen into the deep dark well of household life and am the most unfortunate person. How has it become possible that Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his associates, the great sages, whose very presence makes a place as sanctified as a pilgrimage site, have agreed to come to my place? While the Brahmana was thinking in this way, the guests finished their lunch and sat back very comfortably. At that time, the Brahmana Shrutadeva and his wife, children, and other relatives appeared there to render service to the distinguished guests. While touching the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, the Brahmana began to speak. My dear Lord, you are the Supreme Person, Purushottama, transcendently situated beyond the manifested and unmanifested material creation. The activities of this material world and of the conditioned souls have nothing to do with your position. We can appreciate that not only today have you given me your audience, but you are associated with all living entities as Paramatma since the beginning of creation. This statement by the Brahmana is very instructive. It is a fact that the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, in his Paramatma feature, enters the creation of this material world as Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, and in a very friendly attitude, the Lord sits along with the conditioned soul in the body. Therefore, every living entity has the Lord within him from the very beginning, but due to his mistaken consciousness of life, the living entity cannot understand this. When his consciousness, however, is changed into Krishna consciousness, he can immediately understand how Krishna is trying to assist the conditioned souls to get out of the material entanglement. Shrutadeva continued, My dear Lord, you have entered this material world as if sleeping. A conditioned soul, while sleeping, creates false or temporary worlds in his mind. He becomes busy in many illusory activities, sometimes becoming a king, sometimes being murdered, and sometimes going to an unknown city, and all these are simply temporary affairs. Similarly, your lordship, apparently also in a sleeping condition, enters this material world to create a temporary manifestation, not for your personal necessities, but for the conditioned soul who wants to imitate your lordship as enjoyer. The conditioned soul's enjoyment in the material world is temporary and illusory, and yet the conditioned soul is by himself unable to create such a temporary situation for his illusory enjoyment to fulfill his desires. Although they are temporary and illusory, you enter this temporary manifestation to help him. Thus, from the beginning of the conditioned soul's entry into the material world, you are his constant companion. When therefore the conditioned soul comes in contact with a pure devotee and takes their devotional service, beginning with the process of hearing your transcendental pastimes, glorifying your transcendental activities, and worshiping your eternal form in the temple, offering prayers to you, and engaging in discussion to understand your transcendental position, he gradually becomes freed from the contamination of material existence. And as his heart becomes cleansed of all material dust, you gradually become visible there. Although you are constantly with the conditioned soul, only when he becomes purified by devotional service do you become revealed to him. Others who are bewildered by fruitive activities, either by Vedic injunction or by customary dealings, and do not take to devotional service, are captivated by the external happiness and the bodily concept of life. You are not revealed to such persons. Rather, you remain far, far away from them. But for one who engages in your devotional service and purifies his heart by constant chanting of your holy name, you are very easily understood as his eternal constant companion. It is said that your lordship, sitting in the heart of a devotee, gives him direction by which he can very quickly come back to you, back home. This direct dictation by you reveals your existence within the heart of a devotee. Only a devotee can immediately appreciate your existence within his heart, whereas for a person who has only a bodily concept of life and is engaged in sense gratification, you always remain covered by the curtain of Yogamaya. Such a person cannot realize that you are very near, seen within his heart. For a non-devotee, you are appreciated only as ultimate death. The difference is like the different cats carrying its kittens in its mouth and carrying a rat in its mouth. In the mouth of the cat, the rat feels its death, whereas the kitten feels motherly affection. Similar, present to everyone, but the non-devotee feels you as ultimate cruel death. Whereas for the devotee, you are the supreme instructor and philosopher. The atheist, therefore, understands the presence of God as death, but the devotee understands the presence of God always within his heart, takes dictation from you, and lives transcendently, unaffected by the contamination of the material world. You are the supreme controller and superintendent of material activities, material nature's activities. The atheistic class of men simply observe the activities of material nature but cannot find you as the original background. The devotee, however, can immediately see your hand in every movement of material nature. The curtain of Yogamaya cannot cover the eyes of the devotee of your lordship, but it can cover the eyes of the non-devotee. The non-devotee is unable to see you face to face, just as a person whose eyes are blocked by the covering of a cloud cannot see the sun, although persons flying above the clouds can see the sunshine brilliantly as it is. My dear Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, my dear self-effulgent Lord. I am your eternal servitor. Therefore, kindly order me, what can I do for you? The conditioned soul feels the pangs of material contamination as the threefold miseries, as long as you are not visible to him. And as soon as you are visible, by the development of Krishna consciousness, all miseries of material existence are simultaneously vanquished. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is naturally very much affectionately inclined to his devotees. When he heard Shuddhadeva's prayers of pure devotion, he was very much pleased and immediately caught his hands and addressed him thus: My dear Shuddhadeva, all these great sages, brahmanas, and saintly persons have been very kind to you by personally coming here to see you. You should consider this opportunity to be a great fortune for you. They are so kind that they are traveling with me, and wherever they go, they immediately make the whole atmosphere as pure as transcendence, simply by the touch of the dust of their lotus feet. People are accustomed to go to the temples of God. They also visit holy places of pilgrimage, and after prolonged association with such activities for many days, by touch and by worship, they gradually become purified. But the influence of great sages and saintly persons is so great that by seeing them, one immediately becomes completely purified. Moreover, the very purifying potency of pilgrimages or worship of different demigods is also achieved by the grace of saintly persons. A pilgrimage site becomes a holy place because of the presence of the saintly persons. My dear Shuddhadeva, when a person is born as a Brahmin, he immediately becomes the best of all human beings. And if such a Brahmana, remaining self-satisfied, practices austerities, studies the Vedas, and engages in my devotional service as the duty of the Brahmin, or in other words, if a Brahmana becomes a Vaishnava, how wonderful is his greatness. My feature of four-handed Narayan is not as pleasing or dear to me as a Brahmana and Vaishnava. Brahmana means one who is well conversant with Vedic knowledge. Our Brahmana is the insignia of perfect knowledge, and I am the full-fledged manifestation of all gods. Less intelligent men do not understand me, nor do they understand the influence of the Brahmana Vaishnava. They are influenced by the three modes of material nature and thus dare to criticize me and my pure devotees. A Brahmana Vaishnava, or a devotee already on the Brahminical platform, can realize me within his heart, and therefore he definitely concludes that the whole cosmic manifestation and its different features are effects of the different energies of the Lord. Thus he has a clearer conception of the whole material nature and the total material energy, and in every action such a devotee sees me only and nothing else. My dear Shuddhadeva, you may therefore accept all these great saintly persons, brahmanas and sages, as my bona fide representatives. By worshiping them faithfully, you will be worshiping me more diligently. I consider worship of my devotees to be better than direct worship of me. If someone attempts to worship me directly without worshiping my devotees, I do not accept such worship, even though it may be presented with great opulence. In this way, both the Brahmana Shuddhadeva and the king of Mithila, under the direction of the Lord, worship both Krishna and his followers, the great sages and saintly Brahmanas, on an equal level of spiritual importance. Both Brahmana and king ultimately achieve the supreme goal of being transferred to the spiritual world. The devotee does not know anyone except Lord Krishna, and Krishna is most affectionate to his devotee. Lord Krishna remained in Mithila, both at the house of the Brahmana Shrutadeva and at the palace of King Bahulashva. After favoring them lavishly by his transcendental instructions, he went back to his capital city, Dwarka. The instruction we received from this incident is that King Bahulashva and Shrutadeva, the Brahmana, were accepted by the Lord at the same level because both were pure devotees. This is the real qualification of being recognized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because it has become a fashion in this age to be falsely proud of having taken birth in the family of a Kshatriya or Brahmana. We see persons without any qualification other than birth claiming to be Brahmana or Kshatriya or Vaishya. But as stated in the scriptures, Kalo Shudra Sambhava, in this age of Kali, everyone is born a Shudra. This is because there is no performance of the purificatory process known as samskaras, which begin from the time of the mother's pregnancy and continue up to the point of the individual's death. No one can be classified as a member of a particular caste, especially a higher caste, Brahman and Kshatriya or Vaishya, simply by birthright. If one is not purified by the process of the seed-giving ceremony or Garbhadhana Samskara, he is immediately classified amongst the Sudras, because the Shudras do not undergo this purificatory process. Sex life without the purificatory process of Krishna consciousness is merely the seed-giving process of the Shudras or the animals. Krishna consciousness is therefore the best process of purification. By this process, everyone can come to the platform of Vaishnava, which includes having all the qualifications of a Brahmana. The Vaishnavas are trained to become free from the four kinds of sinful activities: illicit sex, indulgence, intoxication, gambling, and eating animal foods. One cannot be on the Brahminical platform without having these preliminary qualifications, without becoming a qualified Brahmin. One cannot become a pure devotee. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 86th chapter of Krishna, the kidnapping of Subhadra, and Lord Krishna's visiting Shrutadeva and Bahulashva. So the next chapter is called the Prayers by the Personified Vedas, which we will take up hopefully tomorrow if I get back in time, but during our next reading. And this is much more philosophical, and it's going to take a long time to finish that chapter. All right, so we're going to end here today, and we're going to allow you to take questions. Let me allow you all to unmute yourselves. So, if anyone has a question about today's class, they can type in the text window, they can raise their hand, or they can unmute themselves if they're bold enough. Very nice story. And actually, Krishna is showing he's equal to all the devotees, whether they have money or they don't have money, and Krishna is interested in devotion. That's the essence of the story of Bahulashva and Shrutadeva, and of course the story of Subhadra being kidnapped by Arjuna is a wonderful story. It's the Rakshasa style of marriage, which is one of the bona fide Kshatriya styles of marriage that were allowed at that particular time. Rakshasa, Gandharva, normal, Vivaha, these were all bona fide. So, does anyone have a question? Raise your hand, unmute yourself, or type in the text window. And if not, we can end a little early. Okay, going once, going twice. Oh, everybody's shy today. Okay, and going 3 times. So then I guess we'll end. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be back home so we can give our normal class and start the prayers to the Personified Vedas, prayers of the Personified Vedas, which is a very heavy philosophical. Oh, here's a question. Hare Krishna Gurudev. Is it that the sages, along with Krishna, expanded to be at the same place simultaneously? Yes. The sages, that's also described. The sages were able to expand. Pure devotees can expand in such a way, like in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we have Narada Muni expanding and being present in the various abodes in this material world and also the abodes in the spiritual realm. Yes. Good question. Sages have that, pure devotees have that opulence. It's nice. Okay, on that happy note, on that happy note, we'll end. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Subhadra was the daughter of which wife of Vasudeva? Oh, no, she was a daughter of a wife of Vasudeva. I don't know the name of the wife, but she was actually directly Vasudeva's daughter. Okay, got it. So she was the cousin of Arjuna. In those days, sometimes cousin marriages were allowed, although they're basically frowned upon because there can be so many birth defects if that happens. But those days, in that particular case, it was allowed. She was the daughter of one of the wives of Vasudeva. Okay, on that happy note, we'll see everybody tomorrow. All glories to Divine Grace.